وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ. And so we get right into that subject of him being exposed. When we said to the angels, make sajda to Adam, فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسِ. Then they all fell into prostration, they all fell into sajda, with the exception of Iblis. أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Aba, he refused. Arabic language is very sensitive in translation. There's rafada, there's aba, they both mean refuse. And actually if you use aba with illa, it becomes the opposite meaning. So, a lot of times people are interested in word-for-word translations of the Qur'an. When you go word for word, you can miss the entire meaning. You can actually miss the entire meaning. Aba actually gets used when you refuse the command of someone who has authority over you. When you sort of show a lack of regard for the authority above and you disobey it, this is aba. So he shows lack of authority to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Rafada also gets translated refuse. But rafada could be between you and me. I ask you to do something, you refuse. I wouldn't say abayta, I'd say rafadta, you refused. So there's a difference between them. It illustrates that he refused the higher authority above him. Aba. Wastakbara. Istikbar is translated and he was arrogant. Which may be a legitimate translation, but istikbar from istif'al literally means to seek greatness. To seek greatness. And in this word, Allah has given us a real insight into the psyche of Iblis. One, he refused Allah's commandment, which is his major crime. The second is the motive behind that crime. What is it that leads him to that crime? He wants greatness for himself. Why should sajda be done to him? I've been working all this time for the promotion. Well, how does he get it without any experience? How does he get this position? So he refuses out of this position of him seeking this great position. My teacher, Dr. Abdul Sami, said something very subtle about this ayah. And something really scary. I thought it was actually terrifying. He said, what position has Allah given Adam alayhi salam? Allah has told us, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. The greatest honor given to the human being is the fact that he gets to be Allah's slave, service to Allah Azza wa Jal. It's not a position of power, it's a position of weakness. Even though it's honor in it, the honor comes from us acknowledging our weakness before Allah Azza wa Jal. It's a religious position. It doesn't get you treasures or ranks, etc., etc. It's a position essentially of servitude to Allah Azza wa Jal. That's what the position is. You could argue it's a religious position. And Iblis is vying even for that. In other words, what we have to understand is arrogance and seeking power doesn't just happen when you're trying to be the CEO of the company or trying to win the elections and rule a nation and things like that. Arrogance and power struggles can even happen within the religious sphere. Even people of religion, people of knowledge and religion, can vie against each other to have religious authority. There can be arrogance even in the desire to lead prayer, or the desire to be the imam, or be known as the greatest scholar among everybody else. And may Allah protect us and our scholars from this kind of fitna. Because the nation before us was riddled with this fitna. They used their religious rank and they were vying for religious position, and that was the manifestation of their arrogance. It wasn't just worldly acquisitions. And so Aba wastakbara wa kana min al-kafirin, and he had been kana min al-kafirin. He had been from those who had kufr. In other words, Allah is acknowledging He knew of that potential kufr inside him all along. Kana min al-kafirin. This would have been different than asbaha min al-kafirin, because even though kana is a'am, kana includes asbaha. Asbaha would have meant he became from the disbelievers. In other words, when he did this, then he became from the disbelievers. If you say kana, it implies he became, but also Allah is letting us know he knew all along. He had been. He had been that way, except nobody else knew until he actually opened his mouth on that day. That day when his arrogance manifested itself. This is the other scary thing. Just because someone hasn't expressed their arrogance against Allah Azza wa Jal, doesn't mean it's not there. It just came out that day, out in the open, and Allah exposed him, but the disease was already there. If there was no disease, the symptom would never have manifested. His words are just a symptom of a pre-existing disease. So this is something we have to look into inside of ourselves for. I mentioned to you before, let's see if you remember, how many times is this story mentioned in the Qur'an? 7 times. 7 times Allah mentions this story. And there are so many lessons inside this story for all of us. As far as our journey for success towards Allah Azza wa Jal. Here you have 2 creatures of Allah being compared. Adam alayhi salam on the one hand, and Iblis on the other hand. Who does the stupidest thing he could have done. He tries to outsmart Allah Azza wa Jal. Here in this surah, it's not mentioned explicitly. Later on we'll find it. خَلَقْتَهُ مِن نَارٍ. خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. You created me from fire, you created him from clay. He's trying to give a logical explanation for his disobedience. When you and I try to start giving logical explanations for disobeying Allah, which by the way some of us do, you do something wrong and then you try to give a rationale for it. Whose path is that? Who tries to give a logical explanation for disobeying Allah? That's the path of Iblis. And which of these two creatures makes a mistake, because we're going to learn Adam alayhi salam made his historic mistake, and actually both our parents did together, because Allah makes sure we understand it's both of them, unlike the Christians who blame Eve. And actually from it they get the English word evil according to some literaries, because they think the root of all evil is she. Unlike that, we find فَأَزَلَّهُمَا. We'll read this today too. Shaitan caused both of them to slip. In other words, Allah didn't put the blame on one, He put it on both together. So we don't separate her out and single her out in this matter. Anyhow,